Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose, for the second time. And we are on the defense's case, part 34. This is Erik Menendez is on the defendant is on the stand. I want to say this is his second or third. Yeah, this is his third day on the or third part of his testimony. We break when they take breaks. So let us get started here, and please hit the like button so that we can begin. So this is December 7th, 1995. A recess was taken in the morning. That's where we ended last time, and now we are picking right back up where we left off. And the following proceedings were held in open court outside the presence of the jury. So we're going to have some discussion here. The court says there was an objection to 355. What was your objection, Mr. Khan? Yes, we would object to the document as being irrelevant and move under evidence code 352 to exclude it as being more time consuming and non-probative of the issues than relative. Court says, okay, may I see it? Mr. Levin says, yes, Your Honor. Court continues. And what is your offer of proof as the relevance, Mr. Levin? Mr. Levin says, yes, Your Honor. The offer of proof with respect to that document is it corroborates the testimony. First, it corroborates the testimony of Erik Menendez that his mother required him to write out a list of things that he did wrong as a child. That list served as a basis of punishment that he received from his father, that his state of mind was that when he created such a list that it caused him great fear because he knew that the result was going to be that his mother, as an accomplice in his father's brutality, would transmit that list. And he would testify that that list did lead to violence being inflicted upon him by his father. This particular list? Yes, and any list that he created. This particular list, says the court. I would need to inquire, but I believe so, yes. The court says, that's how I interpret your remarks. You said this list. Mr. Levin says, I believe so, Your Honor. Court says, okay. If it can be connected to this particular document, then the objection will be overruled. As far as Exhibit 354, the photograph, well, what was the relevance of this? Mr. Levin says that photograph of the location where Erik Menendez resided in the woods. It's a photographic illustration of a location or near the location where Lyle Menendez molested him in the manner that he described. It serves to illustrate this testimony with respect to the geographic location and the type of area that he lived in when he testified that he lived in the woods. I do not seek to offer any other photograph with respect to that issue. The court says, what issue? The issue of the woods where he lived, and the fact that in the woods it was Lyle Menendez that took him in the woods in a remote area and molested him. Court says, is this a photograph depicting a molestation by Lyle Menendez of Erik Menendez? Mr. Levin says, of course not, Your Honor. No, it's not. It's a photograph of the area, of the specific area of the location, and it also serves to explain and corroborate the fact that Erik Menendez did live in such a remote area and that this is the location where it took place. Court says, and the people's position? Mr. Khan says, yes, I think that this is just another attempt to put before the jury childhood photographs. I don't think that there's a dispute here that the defendant lived in a woodsy area. I think one of the other photographs shows that surrounding the house there appears to be trees. So I don't think that we need to present to the jury a photograph of trees to prove to the jury that there were indeed trees near the house. But it corroborates the defendant's testimony, so it should absolutely come in. If so, that's already been demonstrated through another exhibit. This is just a backdoor way of getting in childhood photographs, which we objected to. We filed a motion with the court to exclude such photographs. It's a picture of a wooded area. It's not like, how is this, how does that hurt their case? Other than it corroborates Erik's testimony. And if necessary, to include another photograph of the trees, maybe we can crop the photograph and just put in the side of the photograph that shows a couple of the trees and cut out the portion that shows the defendant as children, which is really what they want before the jury. Okay, so the brothers are in the photograph, so it's not just the wooded location. I guess they're in it. The court says, well, the court is faced here with not just this one exhibit, but I assume there are other exhibits of photographs that you propose to offer as well, Mr. Levin. Yes, there are, Your Honor. Court says the defendants as they were depicted as children. Is that correct? Mr. Levin says, well, the photographs that I have selected are not just photographs of the family or family portraits of Erik or Lyle Menendez, but photographs which tend to explain or illustrate a particular point that the witness makes. For example, the next photograph that I am going to attempt to use or seek to use is a photograph of Erik Menendez as a young child wherein he is standing next to his father hanging from a chin-up bar during the training that his father would cause him to go through. And in fact, in even one of the photographs, it looks like Erik Menendez is losing his grip and falling, where his father is intently watching, but not going to do anything to try to catch him. And this is the type of fear-inducing behavior that that caused Erik Menendez to fear his father. And it's the type of evidence that the experts First of all, the experts have seen this particular photograph, and the experts will also testify that this is the type of activity which later caused Mr. Menendez to fear his father. Mr. Khan says again, I would object to that. The issue before the court is not so much whether the defendant at any moment in his life may have feared something that his father was about to do, but whether he feared that his father was going to kill him on August the 20th of 1989, and I don't think that the defense should be able to put in or present incident after incident in which the defendant may have had a momentary fear. If there's incident after incident where he has a fear of his father, that's a pattern. So it absolutely is relevant. But he's saying that it shouldn't come in. He's saying, or present incident after incident, which the defendant may have had a momentary fear of something that his father was doing or was going to do, much less photographs, which really don't corroborate what counsel is saying. So I think that, once again, what we are seeing in regard to these photographs is simply more childhood photographs, which are really not probative of the ultimate issue in this case. The court says, well, two observations. One, the people themselves sought to use photographs to depict certain post-crime activities of the defendants, such as depicting items that they purchased after their parents were killed, and the court ruled that it was relevant evidence, demonstrative evidence, to show certain things. And what the defense is arguing is that this is demonstrative evidence analogous to that which the prosecution sought, which is received in evidence and is before the jury. That's an observation. The court has that in mind. But also, the court is concerned about the nature of the examination of the extent of it. How long is it that you propose to question your client about these events, which are remote in time from the incidents of August the 20th, 1989? Do you really think that just because it's remote in time that matters when he lived in that household under that fear every day? Being remote in time has nothing, I mean, if anything, it just shows a pattern, and they should be able to demonstrate that there's always been a pattern of abuse in that household. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I hear this court loud and clear, and in terms of time, I can't tell you with great specificity, but I am concerned about this issue, and I am going to move into a later area shortly, probably no longer than 30 minutes. Then we move into a different area where different events occurred in Mr. Menendez's life that I don't feel will be as controversial. But these events are extremely important to give some meaning to the state of mind that Erik Menendez later developed with respect to those events that occurred. But I don't expect to be long in this area. As I stated, perhaps 30 minutes, perhaps less. Court says, well, but you've already spent quite a bit of time. No, you haven't. There are several issues here, and we discussed them before. They're separate issues. One has to do with the allegation of the SA, and that is related to the defendant's version of the events of August the 20th of 1989, the sequence of events that they've described in their previous testimony, and as that's already been referred to by this witness in his testimony. And there's an issue of whether or not the SA ever occurred in the past or did occur at or near the time of the events of August the 20th, and the people apparently are disputing that. So the defense has been given and will be given substantial opportunity, as much as necessary, to establish, if the defense can establish, that those events occurred, because it plays a factual role in the events of August the 20th. That's an issue. The other issue relates to the mental state of the defendants, or this witness, rather, at the time of the homicides of his parents, and the mental state that has been put forth is out of fear. And his stated fear of his parents at the time he participated in their homicides. The fear that you are now describing has not been related by this witness to his state of mind of fear on August the 20th. You are indicating to me that there is some testimony forthcoming from a witness called by the defense, an expert witness, who will relate this as part of an overall history of the defendant. This witness, who and the expert will describe that history along with his clinical examination of the defendant as a basis for an opinion that, according to your offer of proof and what we had in a previous hearing in this court, that the defendant suffered from a condition described as post-traumatic stress disorder. My, what a world we live in when nowadays PTSD is like common terminology. Back then, you're like, some condition, what's it called? Post-traumatic something or other, it's like it wasn't quite as understood. He asks, "Is that right?" Mr. Levin says, "That's correct, Your Honor." Court says, and there will be some evidence offered, which is still to defend as far as the extent of it by the expert witness as to the impact of such a condition on a person's state of fear or misperception of events, things of that nature, but that's a history that the witness will be considering, and that's different than the defendant's testimony of fear itself, unless he's connecting it to his state of mind on August the 20th, all of which you're presenting as a history that some other witness uses in order to form an opinion and nothing more. It is more, Your Honor, says Mr. Levin. Court says, what else could it possibly be? Mr. Levin says, it is the basis of the diagnostic criteria as stated in the DSM-5R concerning those types of events. That's like the leading leading diagnostic book in psychology. It's concerning those events, he says, those types of life experiences, those kinds of human behaviors to which one is subject, that would cause a certain state of mind that will be explained by the experts as being a mental disorder, in this case, post-traumatic stress disorder. It is not a history. It is to show that these events occurred. For example, if Dr. Wilson testifies that Erik Menendez suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, he is then going to explain what PTSD is, and he's going to explain the relevant and required criteria as it exists in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual used by the American Psychiatric Association. Part of, and important to, an explanation of the development of that disorder is not merely presenting a history of Erik Menendez, but to be able to explain those events in a psychological context of how the perceptions of Mr. Menendez, or how the perceptions of a person who's been exposed to these kinds of life experiences, given the things that that have happened, would respond to certain events. And those events in this case would be the events of August the 20th and the preceding week. And I just want to chime in and say, this isn't the first time this particular judge has listened to the arguments in this case. This is now the second trial. He heard a ton of experts and witnesses that corroborated the abuse, and the experts that said that their fear led up to the events of that day. So this court is playing like dumb, and it's kind of making me mad here. The court says that's not the offer that the court ruled upon in the 801 hearing. This is not profile evidence. First of all, as I indicated in earlier discussions, you start with the defendant's testimony of his state of mind. The expert testimony, if it's received, is offered to corroborate that state of mind. It cannot prove his state of mind. All it can do is corroborate. This is not a trial to prove whether or not the defendant suffers from or did suffer from PTSD. That's not the trial. Okay. This trial relates to what occurred on August the 20th, but PTSD, this judge does not understand PTSD or he's playing stupid. He's saying this trial relates to what occurred on August the 20th and his state of mind on August the 20th. State of mind is not defined as post-traumatic stress disorder because no expert can say somebody suffering from PTSD has had a particular state of mind on any particular date. It's what he had in his state of mind at the time that they took their parents' lives. Mr. Levin says, and that state of mind is fear, and the fear evoking passions came from a misreading and misperception of certain events that transpired in the preceding week. The way in which Mr. Menendez viewed his world at 18 years old during that preceding week on August the 20th, 1989 is and must be explained in a psychological context so that the jury can understand the nature of the defense. That is, that if, in fact, Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were not planning to actually take Erik's life, that his state of mind, although it may be unreasonable, was in good faith and based on the fact that his reading of the cues, his ability to read the cues, how a person with the mental disorder possessed by Erik Menendez would react from certain incidents that occurred at critical stages in his life and caused an individual to read those cues in that way. Without this kind of testimony, the jury could conclude that Erik Menendez acted unreasonably and not in good faith. Court says, well, the question of reasonableness is one that we've had discussions on, as we've also discussed the subject that you've just referred to. That is the basis of the court's ruling that the expert testimony can be presented. But the basis also of the court's ruling was that it is corroborative of the testimony of the defendant, and as we go back in time to these remote events, as they are more remote, the probative value of them becomes less, and the probative value is less because it is only a basis for the expert opinion, which is only corroborative on the defendant's testimony. But all those experiences were in Erik's formative years. So how can you say just because it's far away in time that it doesn't count? It absolutely counts. Those are the first memories of his dad. He was scared of him. So we start first with his testimony, the defendant's testimony, then you go back from that to these other antecedent events. And the longer we spend on these early times, the more remote they are, the less probative they are. And that's how I analyze this. I said this before, this is nothing new. This is how I told you I viewed this matter before, and you're spending a lot of time on this. I'm not concerned so much at this point about the consumption of time, but the potential of confusion of issues, because we get mired in the early events of the childhood about whether someone did or did not write a list or did not take a particular lesson. And the focus of this trial is no longer on the issues that are to be decided by the jury, but on really irrelevant matters. So you're trying to limit their defense and pressure them into not being able to provide their defense due to time limitations and because you think it's going to confuse the jury, even though these are all relevant issues to his state of mind and his fear. This judge is a quack, to me. I totally think that he was perhaps on the take to make sure that these two got convicted, because I really don't see any other way, because his rulings changed quite a bit. And he pushes back a lot on the abuse stuff, which we know is big in the defense of the brothers. So for him to limit that testimony is already just a handicap, you know. Mr. Levin responds with, well, the list is critical, Your Honor, for the reason that it shows that Erik Menendez viewed his mother as an accomplice in his father's brutality. And this we want to explain to the jury that Erik Menendez feared both his mother and father, feared them together and feared them separately. And this list is a critical piece of evidence in explaining the way in which Erik Menendez feared his mother. It's a different from the testimony that's already been elected with respect to Jose Menendez. But I am mindful of the court's comments, and I don't want to run afoul of how the court views these issues. But I do need some time and some leeway to examine Erik Menendez on these early years, and I don't think it will take any longer than 20 or 30 minutes, and it will not be in a manner that creates confusion. And court says, well, the confusion is that it's a distraction from the focal point of the trial. No one will be confused about a description of an event that occurred when the defendant was 10 years old. We can understand that event, but when we spend time focusing on that event to the detriment of focusing on the issues in this case, then that's the potential for confusion. Mr. Levin says, I understand, Your Honor, but what the experts will testify to is that the development years are critical to an assessment, an overall assessment of the type of mental state, the type of fear that the witness had, and to understand that fear, it has to be placed in the context of certain experiences that he has been subject to throughout his life. And these are the fear components which we are trying to demonstrate in the manner that we're doing. The court says, all right, as far as the photograph 354, I don't find that there's any probative value in it, and therefore, on grounds of relevance, the objection is sustained. As far as the list 355, if he can identify that with specificity as a document that was fear-inducing in relationship to his mother and that produced some reaction by his father, then I'll overrule the objection. Mr. Levin says, thank you. Court says, all right, let's get the jury out. So that's a long-winded argument there, but so they're not allowing in a photo, but I think that was the one where with the brothers in the wooded area by the house. But the court is going to allow Mr. Levin to get into the list that he supposedly had to write with his mom. So I don't remember hearing about this one in the first trial, but maybe I did, and I just don't remember. So let's get started. The court says, all right, let's get the jury out. The jury enters the courtroom and the following proceedings are held. The court says, okay, the jury is back. You may continue your direct examination. Mr. Levin says, thank you, Your Honor. I have a Kodak color print envelope with some writing on the outside. It has been previously marked as Exhibit 219, and I ask that it and its contents be marked as Exhibit 356. The court says 356. Mr. Levin says, and I also have looks like a proof sheet of some photographs that's been previously marked as 234. I ask that this document be marked Exhibit 357. And the court agrees. Mr. Levin says, Mr. Menendez, I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as 356 and ask you to take particular note of the writing that appears on the outside of that document. Do you see that writing? Yes. Do you recognize whose writing that is? Yes. And whose writing is that? My mother's. Does your name appear in your mother's handwriting? Yes, it does. What does it say? It says Erik's birthday, November 1976. Now, would you turn to the rear or turn the envelope? Blah, blah. Excuse me, I can't talk. Would you turn to the rear or turn the envelope over? Do you see the sticker with the name on it? Yes. And a receipt? Yes. What does the receipt say? Yes, this one, does it have your name on it? Menendez, 4 Harlow Lane, Muncie, New York. And is that where you resided during is that an area you're familiar with at your 6th birthday? It was my home in Muncie. And I want you to open up the envelope and remove the contents. Do you see some negatives in there? Yes. Would you remove them? You've seen those negatives before, haven't you? I'm not sure if I saw the negatives. I've seen the pictures. Well, can you take a look at the negatives? Hold it up to the light and see if you can tell what's on them. That photo, he says, and he points to one. When you say that photo and you pointed, are you referring to the photographs that have been previously marked as 353, 353A, 352, and 352A? Yes. And are there other photographs on that negative strip as well? Yes. What are those photographs of? My dog, Tristis, my father, some children. Now take a look at what's been marked as 357. Does that look like a proof sheet of the photographs that are on the negatives? Yes. And do you see on the proof sheet the photographs that have been marked previously as 352 and 353? Yes. Including on that photo strip, do you see the other photographs of children from your 6th birthday party? Yes. Now, Mrs. Menendez, before the break, or sorry, Mr. Menendez, before the break, we were talking about a list. Was there a time, or was there several times in your life where your mother would require you to write down a list of things that you had done that day, or that you had done wrong that day? Yes. And did you understand why you were writing that list, making that list? Yes. What did you understand you were writing that list for? So that I would present it to my father when he arrived home for my mother. And was it clear to you that your mother knew that the presentation of that list to uh, your father would result in something happening to you? Yes. And what was it that would happen to you typically upon presenting a list of this type? I would get hit or beaten in some way or yelled at. Well, I have a list or a piece of paper that's been previously marked 355. I'd like you to take a look at it. Just look at it and read it to yourself. First of all, is that your writing on this particular document? When I was younger. Is that the type of list that you would be told by your mother to create to present to your father? Yes. Do you remember that particular list? Lists of this nature. And what kind of things are on that list? Objection calls for hearsay, inadequate foundation. The court says, I didn't hear the latter part. Inadequate foundation. The court says, well, first of all, the list is there. It doesn't have to be read, but as far as the foundation, sustained. Mr. Levin says, the things on that list, are they things that you were told to write down? Yes. And who told you to write them down? My mother did. Was there ever a time in your life where you wrote a list such as Exhibit 355 where you didn't present it to your father? No. Was there ever a time that you wrote a list like Exhibit 355 when you presented it to your father and you weren't beaten? Beaten how? Or hit? Almost always I was at least hit. Was there ever a time when you created a list such as Exhibit 355 where you didn't have fear? No. And who did you fear when you wrote a list, such as Exhibit 355? My father. Is Exhibit 355, and can you tell from the handwriting on that list approximately how old you were when you wrote those things? 7, 8, 9, 6? Kind of went all over the place there. Can you say with as much degree of certainty as you can at this time that Exhibit 355 was in fact a list that you presented to your father? It was. And would that list have caused you to be afraid of him? Yes. What kind of things are on that list? Mr. Khan says objection calls for hearsay and inadequate foundation. Overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says, times when I was in my mama's car complaining about food or when I wouldn't go to sleep on time, Mr. Levin says, how does the list start at the top? What Erik did. And is there numbers, items? 9 numbers. What's the first one? At home, Erik would not eat on time. What's the second number? At home, Erik would not go to sleep or get his pajamas on. What's number 3? In Mama's car, we went to, I'm not sure what that says, but, quote, Erik was complaining about onions on his hamburger. Who's Mama? Mama? Who's Mama? Mama's my grandmother. So not Kitty, but uh, one of his grandmothers. And what's item number 5? At Mama's house, Erik was complaining about the tape recorder. Okay, what's number 5? That was 4? I'm sorry. He says that was 4. And Erik says, I'm sorry. And then, so what's number 5? I told Erik not to read a letter lots of times, but he still read it. What's number 6? At Mama's, he went to sleep fine. 7. At home, Erik would not eat his spinach. 8. At the store, Erik wanted to steal. 9. At home, Erik would not eat tuna. How often would you be required to make a list like that up? Often. I want to ask you a couple of questions, a couple of more questions about some of the early times in which you feared your father. Were all the occurrences that caused you to fear your father things that he did to you, or did they involve your brother? Often they involved my brother. And what kind of things would your father do to your brother that would cause you to fear your father? He would yell at my brother, hit my brother, whip my brother, things like that. Did you know what your brother had done to receive that kind of punishment or treatment? It was often random in the house. Sometimes you were hit because he was in a bad mood or because my mother had said something to him. Sometimes you didn't know why. Sometimes I knew why. A lot of memories I have are just of the sound of the hitting and not so much what transpired before. Now, you described before events that occurred while you were swimming that caused you to fear your father. Were there other things that your father did during other sporting events that caused you to fear him? Yes. What events? What type of athletic events come to your mind? Soccer? Tennis? And what would your father do during your soccer that would cause you fear? Objection vague as to time. Sustained. How old were you when you played soccer? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And was it formal type soccer where you completed where you competed with other children? There were 2 different leagues, the local league and then the All-Star League, and I would compete on both. Would your father participate in your soccer meets? Yes. Would he participate in your soccer practice? Yes. Would your mother participate in soccer practice? Generally not. Did your father have a regimen with respect to how it was you were to train for soccer? I don't understand. All right, let me ask you what your father did in the earliest remembrance of fear with respect to your soccer training. Objection, vague as to time. Overruled. During a game, when a game was being played and I was running along the field, he would step in and he would grab me and he would yell at me and tell me what I should be doing and he would put me back in the game. And these sorts of things during games. I would be afraid of not doing what he asked right. Were there soccer coaches at that time? Yes. And did you ever see a soccer coach ever interfere with your father coming out onto the field and grabbing you in the manner you just described? Nobody ever interfered with my father. Would your father come right on to the field? No, he would. Well, he'd step a little bit onto the field, but he wouldn't walk out into the middle of the field. Generally, if I was playing left wing or fullback and left position or in the right position near the sidelines. I remember one time my brother was running up the field and he reached his hand out and grabbed him by the shirt and pulled him. And it was when we were close in proximity to him. Were you able to see that, your father grabbing Lyle Menendez? Yes. What did he do when he grabbed him? He would shake him and yell and tell him what he was doing wrong and what he wanted him to do and how he wanted him to defend when a man would come over with the ball and how he wanted him to score or such things. After soccer was over, did you go somewhere? Objection, irrelevant. Sustained. Did you have lots of friends during this period of time in your life? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. No. Were you allowed to bring other children over to your house? Objection. Irrelevant. Sustained. Did your father tell you anything with respect to well, first of all, did you want friends? Objection. Irrelevant. Sustained. Did your father tell you anything about having friends as a child? Objection. Irrelevant. Overruled. Yes. What did he tell you? He told me that I was not to make friends, that friends, he had different quotes that he would use about why I should avoid friendships, certainly in sports, never have friends, and what friends were a sign of, and so on. And what were friends a sign of, according to your father? Weakness, vulnerability. He was a man who stood by himself and alone with no close friends, and that's how he felt that a person should live his life. Well, how was it that you understood that having a friend would be a sign of weakness as your father related it to you? Well, he told me that I should always beware of friends and that you should worry about the forces in life that will bring you down, and sometimes they're going to be disguised as a handshake or a friend, and that you should never trust anyone, including him. Well, he got one thing really right on that they shouldn't trust him. How did he relate that to you about not trusting even him? He would do exercises, either where I was jumping off a counter or where I was holding on to a rope that he was holding, and he would have me do this exercise over and over where he protected me and he'd grab me. If I jumped off a counter, he'd grab me. If I was on a rope, he'd make sure I wouldn't fall. And I would do it several times in a row, and then on the what he wanted to be the final time, I would jump off the counter and I would hit the ground, or I would hold onto the rope and he would let it drop and I would fall to the ground, and he would tell me never to trust anyone, even your father. What kind of sick, twisted psycho does that to their children? What's your earliest remembrance of your father doing this type of activity on you? From the time I was in Muncie. So 6, 7 years old. Your Honor, I have a photograph that's been previously marked Exhibit 180. I ask that it be marked Exhibit 358. Court says 358. Mr. Khan says, I would object on grounds of relevance in 352. The court says, all right, let me see it, please. There was a pause in the proceedings. The court says, all right, objection overruled. Mr. Levin says, showing you the photograph that's been previously marked as Exhibit 358. Do you recognize who is depicted in that photograph? Yes. Who is depicted in that photograph? Myself and my father. And your father is the figure in the lower left-hand corner? Yes. What are you doing? I'm holding on to a bar, crying. This was shown in trial 1, where little baby Erik is holding on to like a monkey bar type thing, but like higher up. I can't think of what they're called, but those bars that you do pull-ups on. And he uh was holding on to that bar, and Jose's just looking at him and making no effort to save him, and little baby Eric's crying and like looking terrified. It's a heartbreaking photo. And who's taking the photo, by the way? Is that Kitty just like, oh, haha, this is so funny? Like, what are you doing? Was that the type of activity that your father would subject you to even at an early age? From before I can remember. Was this the kind of activity that led to your father telling you, as he let you fall to the ground, not even to trust him? Yes. Did you learn not to trust him? I did not trust him. Did you do what he told you to do? Always. Did your father ever threaten you? Yes. What did he threaten you, or what did he threaten to do? Typical kinds of things. Threatened to hit me, threatened to hurt my dog. He threatened to not have me eat dinner. He threatened me in whatever manner. When I got older, threats became different, but earlier in life it was generally just to be mean. Was your father the kind of person that made good on his threats? Yes. And was that what you came to believe? Yes. Now, with respect to friends, did the friends have the fact that you were told that friends were a sign of weakness? Were you told not to have any friends? Yes. Did you try to have any friends? I wanted friends. Did you have any friends at the time your father was assaying you? I had, what do you mean by friends? Kids that I knew or kids that I would invite over to my house? Do you have any remembrance of any particular child that you wanted to get close to? Yes. And who comes to mind? There was a kid named Tommy who lived in my neighborhood who was he was the only kid I knew. A kid named Victor when I was in the 4th grade, a girl named Beth when I was in the 5th grade. Were you able to have Victor over to your house? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. No. Why not? I didn't want to invite my friends over to the house. I was very uncomfortable doing that, and I was afraid for them. I was afraid for myself. If it was a very There was always a lot of pressure and intensity in my house, and inviting people over would put you at risk to anything. And so I just generally tried to keep my friends outside the house, and partly because I didn't want my father to know that I was friends with this person or that person at school. It's not bad to keep your father in the dark since he's such a controlling freak that and you know how he feels about friends, so you might want to keep your friends away from him. Why wouldn't you want your father to know who your friends were with, or who you were friends with? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. Because he didn't want me to have any close relationships. Do you know why he didn't want you to have any close relationships? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Did he ever tell you that you were not to tell anyone about the fact that you were having relations with that he was having relations with you and that you were doing things to him? Yes. And how did he convey that to you? Early on, he simply told me that if I told anybody about what was happening in the bedroom, that it would stop and that it would no longer continue and that I would no longer get attention from him. And later on, that changed. When you say early on that it would stop, What put it in a time frame about your age? Is this early childhood? Well, from when I was 6 until I was 11. Now, at 11 years old, things really changed for you, didn't they? Yes. Did your father ever tell you that he was doing these things with you for a particular reason? Well, he would, often. He would give me lectures or speeches when he was in my bedroom about the bonding that a father-son would have, and he would relate it to ancient times, and he would go on with stories, fun stories, exciting stories, brave stories of other people in the same type of activity, like the Spartans or whatever, something, along those lines, like you got to do it for, I don't know, whatever reasons that are depraved and sick. How was it related to you? I mean, when you say he would tell you stories, what things would he tell you? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. He would tell me that this was a natural thing. He would tell me about the times with the Romans and the Greeks and how before battle they would bond together, or the father and the son would bond together, and they would share a time of peace together with one another, and then they would go off and die in battle, or they would go off and fight. Was this before he would touch you on that particular session that he would talk, or after? Now, did you participate in conversations with your father during the times that he would come to you in your bedroom? No. Why not? If he asked me a question, I would answer him, but silence was, I would say, the most important rule in the bedroom. And he believed that silence was something that a man, if a man had, he had great power, the ability to remain silent, and I wouldn't be allowed to speak unless he asked me a question. How long would these sessions with your father typically last? Objection, irrelevant. The court says, what are you referring to? Mr. Levin says, I'm referring to the times that your father would come to your bedroom and touch you. 20, 30 minutes, sometimes longer. Did it later draw out into longer sessions? Yes. Did it later draw out into more complex situations for you, ritualistic, things like that? Yes. You testified before that you had been molested by your father for 12 years. Did you find that during this 12 years that you could see certain repetitive types of contacts or conduct that your father would do? Yes. And certain things that he liked to do, normally, certain sexual preferences that your father enjoyed that he liked? Yes. And did you come to give these names? Objection, irrelevant, and 352. Overruled. The witness says yes. Now, the type of sex that you described before, did you later come to give that a name? What are you referring to? When your father would ask you to orally copulate him, did you later come to give that some kind of a name? Yes. And what name did you give that? Nice sex. What other kinds of sex did you come to name? Knees, rough sex, actual sex. Was there a period of time where the sexual activity that you were having with your father changed from the way that it was to something entirely different? Yes. And what point in time in your life was that? When I was 11. Did anything happen at that precise time in your life that caused you to believe that you were at fault or for the change in in behavior of your father? Yes. And what was that behavior that your father now exhibited with you at 11 years old that he had not before? Objection, irrelevant, and 352. Overruled. The witness says, you're asking for the first time or generally? The first time. He had me get down on my knees and massage him. He had you get down on your knees and massage him where? His penis. And how were you to massage his penis? My mouth. Had you done that before? Yes. Had you done that many times before? Yes. And had you done it to the point where he had ejaculated before? Yes. And had ejaculated in a towel before? Yes. Had he always ejaculated in a towel before? A towel or a sheet. Was he always nice to you and kind to you before? Yes. What was different about this particular time? He'd just been having a fight with my mother, and there was a lot of screaming downstairs, and he came up. He was very angry, and he was yelling at me and slapping me, and was completely different than he had ever been before. And in this particular occurrence, Mr. Menendez, how did he treat you in the bedroom sexually? He was not nice to me. What did he do that wasn't nice to you? Just generally, when my father would come into the bedroom, everything was nice. Sometimes a look scared me, but generally he would say nice things and he would act kindly, and if something hurt me, he would stop. And then this time in the mood, in the range he was in, nothing I said mattered, and it was very confusing. He would tell me to kneel down in a certain position, and then he would hit me, and I would fall off my bed, and he would tell me to kneel down again, and I was just going with I was just going with the flow because I didn't know what he wanted, and it was a frightening time. Did this continue, this type of behavior? Yes. And was there a time when your father no longer ejaculated in a towel or a sheet? You mean sometimes he wouldn't and sometimes he would? Do you recall the first time it was that your father ejaculated and it was not in a towel or in a sheet? Yes. Where was it? It was in my mouth. And when was that? In my bedroom when I was 11. Was this at a time when your father's behavior had changed? Objection irrelevant. Evidence Code Section 352. Overruled. Yes. What do you remember about this particular occurrence? That he was arguing with my mother. I heard the footsteps coming. Mr. Khan says, I'm going to ask for a recess, Your Honor, if the witness cannot continue at this point. Oh, so he's probably getting a little emotional. And then Mr. Levin says, I think he can continue. Do you feel like you can continue, Mr. Menendez? Witness says, he threw open my door. Mr. Khan again objects and says, Your Honor, I'll call for a recess, regardless of counsel's position. The court says, well, if the witness can't continue with the testimony, then we'll proceed. Mr. Levin said, Mr. Menendez, do you feel these things aren't easy for you to talk about? Objection leading. The witness says no. Overruled. The answer will stand. Do you want to talk about these things? Objection irrelevant. Overruled. No. Do you always react in a similar manner that you are now when you talk about these things? Objection vague as to always. Overruled. No. Sometimes I'm alone in my room or in the cell at the jail and I remember back, and sometimes I don't cry. Objection non-responsive. Motion to strike. Court says, all right, sustained. The answer is stricken as non-responsive. How's that not responsive? I think that is a response, but okay. Mr. Levin says, do you feel that you can continue your testimony? Yes. Objection irrelevant as to what the witness believes, Your Honor. Overruled. Let's proceed. Mr. Levin says, do you want to continue? Objection irrelevant. The court says, let's just go ahead. Mr. Levin says, all right, Mr. Menendez, I know it's difficult. Objection, that's an argument. I'll make a motion to strike, says Mr. Khan. The court says, all right, just ask the next question. Mr. Levin says, I want you to think back, and I want you to recall that incident as best you can and relate it to the jury. My dad threw open the door to the room and told me to kneel down on my bed, and I did so. He came over to me and he hit me, and I went off my bed and hit the wall. And he told me to kneel down on the floor, and he was unbuckling his pants, and he pulled out his penis and he grabbed my head and started massaging his penis with my mouth. How did he grab your head? With his hand on my head. Did he direct your head to any particular location? Towards him. Was his penis erect? Yes. Do you know what he was going to have you do? Before? No. Did you try to resist him? No. Why not? Because if I resisted, I was just afraid that I would get worse or that it would get worse, and I never resisted anything my father did in those years. How did you feel at that time? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. I was frightened. What did you do? I did what he asked me to do, and that's what I did. Did he ejaculate? At one point he did, and I tried to pull away, and he held me there. Held you where? He held his penis in my mouth. Where did he ejaculate? In my mouth. What did you do? I was crying. Did he tell you then to do anything? He shoved me away. What did you do when he shoved you away? I was crying, and I stayed in the corner, and he began yelling at me. He was upset with you? The whole incident, he was upset. He had been slapping me and just angry, unlike he had ever been before. Did he say anything to you that you now remember? Yes. What was it he said? He said, "Why can't you be like your brother? Why do you always have to cry? You're not good enough to be a Menendez. You'll get used to it." Things like that. And what did you do following that act? Did you go to the bathroom? I threw up. Was your mother home at that time? Yes. Did she come upstairs? No. Did you blame yourself for this change in your father's behavior? Yes. Why did you blame yourself? Objection, irrelevant under Evidence Code Section 352. Overruled. I just felt I didn't like myself. I felt that my dad was angry at me. It continued on like that, and I just thought that obviously I had done something wrong to upset him. Was there any particular event that was significant in your life that came just before this change in your father's sexual behavior with you? Yes. And what was it? I stopped swimming, and I stopped playing soccer, and I stopped playing tennis full time. Or started playing tennis full time, sorry. And why did you start playing tennis full time? I had come of age and it was time to choose a sport. When you say it was time to choose a sport, did someone require you to choose a sport? My father. Did you have a choice whether or not to participate in sports at all? No. And what was it that was presented to you? It was presented to me that I was to choose one of the sports, and I thought that he wanted me to pick tennis. Lyle began playing tennis full time, so I picked tennis. Did your father express any disappointment that you picked tennis? Not at the time, verbally, no. Did you think that your father's behavior in the bedroom as it changed had some relationship to the sport that you picked? Yes. Why? Because he was mean and he was suddenly cruel, and the only good time I got to spend with him was in my bedroom. And so I was desperately searching for a reason and a way to change it back. And I thought that maybe he really wanted me to really pick swimming because he had been a swimmer and because my grandmother had been a swimmer and swimming was in the family. So why didn't you just quit tennis and start swimming? It just wasn't like that. Why not? Because I didn't have, I don't know, I didn't have the line of communication. I wasn't able to talk to my dad and sit down and say, if you don't want me to pick tennis, I'll swim. I didn't talk to my dad in that way. During this period of time, what grade were you in at 11 years old? I was in the fifth grade again. When you say fifth grade again, this is the time that you repeated the fifth grade? Yes. And you repeated it at PDS. No, I transferred. I was in fifth grade at Hopewell, and then I stayed back and retook fifth grade at PDS. And how well or how are you doing in school at that time? Objection, irrelevant. sustained. As a result of the essay, the acts that you were having with your father, the fear you had that you've described, did that leave you, the fear, once you left the bedroom? Objection, vague. Rephrase the question. You expressed the fact that you developed fear of your father. Is that correct? I had fear of my father from before that. Did you only fear your father when you were in the bedroom? No. Did you ever think of the acts of sex that your father was having with you outside of the bedroom? Objection, irrelevant. Sustained. Did you ever fear when the next time your father would visit you in your room? Yes. Did you ever find that you were having trouble concentrating in school? Objection. Mr. Levin says, because of the fear of your father. Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. The witness says yes. And what, if anything, would that cause you to do? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. This is getting ridiculous. Like every question is being objected to. I would blank out or space out on the tennis court or with my friend or in school because it caused problems because I was in the middle of a test or a teacher was speaking to me, but I tried to stay focused. Mr. Menendez, aren't your school records just filled with such incidents of objection leaning and argumentative? Sustained. Have teachers brought to your attention your concentration problems? Objection calls for hearsay and irrelevant. Court says, can you be more specific as to how you mean brought to his attention? Mr. Levin says, did you ever tell a teacher in school, or let me ask this, had it ever been brought to your attention by a teacher during the 5th grade at PDS that you were not paying attention? Objection, irrelevant, 352. The court says, in what way did this occur? Be more specific. Mr. Levin says, during a specific time when you would space out and lose your concentration as a result of the fear of your father and thinking about him, did you ever have a teacher confront you and ask you what was wrong? Objection, irrelevant, 352. Overruled. Yes, many times. And did you ever report to the teacher what your father was doing to you? No, of course not. Why not? A whole number of reasons. I didn't want to get my dad in trouble. It was a little embarrassing at that point. I was afraid of what my dad would do. As a result of the change in your father's behavior, did you try to do something to change your father's behavior back to the way it was before it became violent? Yes. And what did you try to do? I didn't really know what was causing him to be angry at me, so I just tried to do everything right. I tried to try hard on the tennis court. I really tried hard to improve my grades. I tried to generally to get him to approve of me so he would be happy with me. Try to be perfect in every way. Yes. Were you successful? No. Did your father react? Did you have success at achieving some degree of bettering yourself in school and at tennis and those kinds of things? My grades went up and my ranking in tennis improved. And did your father respond favorably to those things? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. I learned when I was 12 or 13 that he could care less about my grades in school, but in tennis he was happy that I was improving in the ranking and he wanted me to be number 1 in the middle states. And so I was moving up the ladder, and so he was happy about that. Now, during this period of time, around 11 years old or so, was your mother assisting you with helping getting your grades up? Objection, irrelevant. Man, they do not want any of this coming in the state. Court overrules that. The witness says, 11? No, I had done a lot of training with my mother from 7 to 9 in several attempts to get into PDS and had continued on again when I was beginning to have problems. A lot of teachers complaining about my not being able to concentrate and doing poorly in school in 6th grade. Well, was it important to your mother as you perceived her, that you get into PDS? It was very important. Why? PDS was a prestigious school, and in New Jersey, it was one of the better schools in the, well, I don't know if it's the better schools in the country. I was told that it was certainly one of the better schools in New Jersey, and a lot of wealthy kids went to the school. It was a good name school to be going to, and it was a good school in terms of education. Did your mother make it clear to you that she wanted you to go to PDS? Objection, irrelevant, 352. Well, he's already asked this in a different way, without objection, so overruled. The witness says yes. Did you have any fear that something bad would happen if you didn't get into PDS? Objection, irrelevant, that type of fear. Rephrase the question, says the court. Did you understand that? Did you think you had a choice to go to PDS? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. Well, I failed to get into PDS several times, but you mean in terms of applying to PDS? Yes. No, I didn't have a choice. Who made it clear to you that you didn't have a choice? Objection assumes facts not in evidence. Sustained. Why did you feel you didn't have a choice? I was told that I was going to be going to PDS, and so I don't understand. I didn't have a choice. Upon your failing to get into PDS during that time that you just indicated, did your mother call you any names? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. Yes. What did she call you? She would call me stupid, tell me that I was born dumb. At the time, I really wanted to get into it for her because if objection, non-responsive, motion to strike. Sustained after reference to the name that she called. Everything else is stricken. Mr. Levin says, were you ever told during those early years, or at least when you repeated fifth grade, that you had dyslexia? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. Were you ever told, or did you ever feel that you had problems comprehending certain schoolwork? Objection irrelevant. Sustained. Did you ever receive any special education, special training other than the normal classes that you attended? Objection irrelevant. 352. Sustained. Your Honor, this would be a good time to break. I know it's a few minutes early, but I do want to go into a new area. The court says, okay, we'll take our recess then, and we'll accommodate the schedule of the jury. We'll resume tomorrow at 8:30. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll ask that you return so you can start tomorrow at 8:30. The jury exited the courtroom, and then we're going to have some arguments, but that's going to be in the next. Oh, wait, no. Never mind. It is this episode. We're going to continue on. Sorry about that. So the jury leaves, and then we only have a couple more pages left. Jury exits the courtroom, and the following proceedings were held. The court says, all right, what is the next area you're going into, Mr. Levin? Mr. Levin says, I'm not certain, Your Honor, but it's just going to be a different area. I have a variety of choices and topics, and I need to confer with my client. The court says, all right, keep in mind our discussion earlier today as far as the focus of the testimony, and now the jury exits the jury room. The court continues the issue of remoteness that we've discussed. Anything else at this point that counsel wish to bring to the court's attention before we take our recess till tomorrow? Mr. Levin says, no, Your Honor. Mr. Gessler says, no, Your Honor. Court says, okay, I would ask that if you have exhibits that you propose to use during the examination of your client, that you show them to the prosecutor ahead of time if you haven't done so that we don't have these interruptions during the testimony. If there are specific objections to exhibits, then we can address those prior to the jury coming in the box. Mr. Khan says, yes, Your Honor. And in fact, if I could add to that, there was the rule during the prosecution's case in chief that we had to show the defense the exhibits one day before we intended to use them. I would also ask that counsel give us a one-day notice. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, they've all been in evidence sitting here for 2 years. The court says, that's not the point. They have no idea which ones you're going to use. Ms. Abramson says they're sitting in the box. The court says versus which ones you're not going to use. If you have them out and make sure they're available to the prosecutors so they can view them and we can have any hearings that are necessary in that regard. All right, then we'll be in recess until tomorrow at 8:30. If there are specific objections to these exhibits, we'll take those up at that time. I have one matter I want to discuss with the defense, an ex parte matter, so we'll clear the courtroom for this purpose. So he's having a one-sided conversation. The state is not in the room. What's that about? We don't know because it's sealed. And they only talked for a few pages, but still, I'm curious what they talked about. Anywho, all right, so that is the conclusion of part 34, Erik's testimony for today. We will come back with December 8th, because remember, December 7th was a short day. They wanted to leave by noon. The jurors had something or whatever. I can't remember what he said, but so today was a half day for the jurors, and then tomorrow we'll get into December 8th testimony, and it's still going to be Erik on the stand, just FYI. He's going to be on for a little while, just so you know. So, all right, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Let me know if you think of anything from the first trial when we streamed watching Erik's testimony till now, if there's things that stick out to you and what you notice and any changes and whatnot. So let me know what you guys notice as we're comparing the two trials. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.